The grocery store was quiet on a calm afternoon, the usual hum of conversations blending with the beeping of cash registers. Mr. Harris, a retired veteran wearing his worn military cap, approached the checkout line with a gentle smile, holding just a few essentials. As he placed the items on the conveyor belt, the young clerk Olivia froze. Her eyes narrowed, locking onto the cap as her face tightened with disapproval. "I'm sorry, but I can't serve you," Olivia said loudly, her voice carrying across the store. "I don't support what your uniform represents. Violence, oppression. I won't be part of glorifying that." A hush fell over the store. Customers turned toward the confrontation, whispering amongst themselves. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others remained silent, unsure whether to intervene. Mr. Harris, calm yet visibly hurt, stood in place. His hands trembled slightly as he held onto his cane, his dignity unwavering despite the public humiliation. The tension seemed unbearable until the store manager arrived. What he did next would restore faith in kindness and respect, leaving the entire crowd in tears. Mr. Harris remained calm, his weathered face reflecting quiet strength despite the sting of Olivia's words. The small-town grocery store, once filled with the usual hum of conversations and scanning beeps, was now unnervingly silent. Olivia, the young clerk, stood rigid, arms crossed, her voice trembling but loud enough for all to hear. "I'm not going to scan your groceries," she repeated. "Wearing that cap, it's a symbol of violence and oppression. I won't be part of it." A mother with her young daughter clutched her cart tighter, both watching with wide eyes. A middle-aged man near the self-checkout froze, holding a loaf of bread, unsure whether to leave or stay. The air felt heavier with every passing second. Mr. Harris, gripping his cane, took a slow breath. His voice, though softer than hers, carried undeniable strength. "Miss, I wore this cap not for myself, but for those who didn't make it home. I don't wear it to glorify war. I wear it to honor the friends I lost, the ones who never got a chance to grow old." Olivia's face twisted with frustration. "That doesn't change what it stands for. My brother served too. You know what he came back with? Trauma, PTSD. Your so-called service destroyed him. I can't stand here and pretend you're some hero just because you have a uniform and a flag on your hat." The crowd shifted again. Some nodded quietly. Others frowned. The manager, Jake, had begun noticing the situation from a distance, his eyes narrowing with concern as he approached from the back of the store. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. His voice remained measured, compassionate even. "I'm sorry for your brother's pain. I truly am. No soldier leaves war unchanged. But that pain you speak of, it's not because we chose violence. It's because war leaves wounds no one can see." The crowd murmured, whispers rippling as onlookers absorbed his words. Olivia's face remained hardened, but her arms were no longer crossed so tightly. At that moment, Jake reached the register. His voice was calm but authoritative. "What's going on here?" Olivia gestured toward Mr. Harris, voice quieter but still firm. "I refuse to serve him. He's part of the problem, part of the system that's hurt too many people." Jake looked between Olivia and Mr. Harris. The veteran's groceries sat untouched on the belt. Customers watched closely, waiting for the manager's decision. But what Jake said next would change the entire tone of the confrontation. The silence deepened as all eyes locked onto Jake, the store manager, standing between Olivia and Mr. Harris. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken emotions. The veteran's groceries sat untouched on the conveyor belt, a stark reminder of the conflict unfolding. Jake's expression remained calm, yet firm. He spoke with measured authority, addressing Olivia directly. "Olivia," he said, his voice steady, "I understand you're upset, but refusing service to someone based on their uniform isn't how we handle disagreements in this store. This man is a paying customer, and he deserves respect like anyone else here." Olivia's face flushed, her arms dropping to her sides. "But he's wearing that cap like it's something to be proud of. My brother. He came back broken. The people who sent him into that war never cared about what happened afterward." And now, he's just another forgotten soldier with nothing left. How am I supposed to stay silent about that? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged sympathetic glances. Others avoided eye contact altogether, clearly torn between Olivia's pain and the veteran's silent dignity. A woman near the back of the line whispered, "Someone needs to stop this." An older man near the frozen section crossed his arms, shaking his head. "This isn't right. That man served our country. Show some respect." Jake raised his hand gently, signaling for calm. "I'm not asking you to silence your pain, Olivia. I'm asking you to handle it differently. Mr. Harris isn't responsible for the system you're angry at. He's a human being who served, just like your brother." Mr. Harris finally spoke again, his voice softer but steady. "I'm sorry for what your brother went through, miss, and I won't stand here and pretend war doesn't leave scars. It does, but that's exactly why I wear this cap. For the ones who didn't make it back, for those who never got a chance to heal. I wish I could change how the world works, but punishing me for what happened to your brother won't bring peace to either of us." Olivia blinked rapidly, struggling to maintain her composure. The anger she carried so fiercely was beginning to crack, replaced by something else: conflict, confusion. Jake nodded at Mr. Harris, then turned to the crowd. "This store stands for respect, not just for veterans, for everyone. But respect means hearing each other's pain instead of letting it divide us." The tension in the air seemed to shift. Conversations softened. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were listening. Olivia shook her head, her face still tight with emotion. Though the words of both Mr. Harris and Jake had begun to soften the room, she wasn't ready to let go of the anger simmering beneath the surface. Her voice, trembling yet firm, cut through the hush. "You're asking me to just forget? To pretend like everything's fine because he wears that cap? No, my brother came home a different person. He lost everything, his job, his peace of mind, and now I'm supposed to just ring up his groceries like none of that matters?" The crowd stirred. A woman near the produce section whispered to her husband, "She's hurting, but this is too far." Jake kept his composure, speaking with a calm but unwavering authority. "Olivia, no one is asking you to forget your pain, or your brother's. But blaming Mr. Harris for the failures of a broken system isn't justice, it's misplaced pain. He didn't send your brother to war, he's not the reason your family suffered." Mr. Harris remained silent, his face calm, but his grip tightening slightly on the handle of his cane. Though the words stung, he showed no anger, only a quiet, patient understanding. Olivia's lips trembled. "You say that, but you don't get it. People in uniform, it's like they represent everything that broke my family, and no one ever seems to care until it's too late." For the first time, Mr. Harris spoke, his voice steady but heavy with empathy. "You're right about one thing, miss. Not everyone who served came back whole. Many of us, we lost more than friends overseas. We lost pieces of ourselves. I know soldiers who never found their way back. I've lost more brothers than I can count, not just on the battlefield, but after. Men who were forgotten once the cameras stopped rolling." The crowd was no longer just watching. They were feeling the weight of his words. Mr. Harris continued, his voice thick with sincerity. "But you can't see my heart under this cap. You don't know the nights I've prayed for peace, the moments I've relived every painful memory I carry. I don't wear this because I'm proud of war. I wear it to honor those who didn't get the chance to stand here today." The entire store seemed to exhale. The rigid posture in Olivia's stance finally cracked, her eyes glassy with the conflict between her pain and his honesty. Jake, seizing the moment, added, "Olivia, it's okay to be hurt. But this, what's happening here, doesn't have to end in division. It can end with understanding. Please, let's not let pain turn into hate." A ripple of quiet agreement spread through the crowd. Olivia swallowed hard, blinking back the tears threatening to fall. The air in the store felt heavier yet quieter, like a fragile truce had been struck, but the tension still lingered. Olivia's eyes remained fixed on Mr. Harris, her posture less aggressive now, but her face clouded with unresolved pain. The crowd stood silently, unsure whether the moment was truly over. Jake, the store manager, took a deep breath, stepping forward. His presence felt calming, not forceful. His voice was measured but direct as he addressed both Olivia and the watching crowd. I need everyone here to listen carefully. This isn't just about a disagreement at a checkout counter. This is about respect, not just for veterans, not just for pain, but for each other as human beings. His words echoed through the aisles, drawing the attention of even those who had been quietly observing from the edges of the store. Turning to Olivia, Jake continued, his tone gentler now. Olivia, I understand why you're hurting. I know you're speaking from a place of pain. And it's not wrong to feel what you feel. But right now, you're directing that pain at the wrong person. Mr. Harris isn't your enemy. He didn't create the pain your brother faced when he returned home. Her lips parted as if to respond, but Jake continued, his voice kind but unwavering. I know what it's like to carry personal pain into the workplace, but there's a difference between holding pain and letting it turn into anger. You're better than this, Olivia. You've shown kindness here before. I've seen it firsthand. So, I'm asking you, what kind of person do you want to be remembered as? The one who lets grief harden them, or the one who rises above it? Olivia blinked rapidly, clearly shaken by his words. Mr. Harris, still standing silently, gave a small nod of encouragement. His expression, though marked with years of hardship, reflected nothing but compassion. Jake then turned to the crowd, his voice projecting further. And to everyone else here, we're not just witnesses to a disagreement. We're part of this too. Respect isn't about sides. It's not about who shouts the loudest. It's about empathy, patience, and the courage to see beyond our differences. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience, agreeing, processing. Some nodded. Others exchanged soft whispers of support. Jake looked back at Olivia. I'm asking you, Olivia. Take a breath. Let's reset. Serve Mr. Harris his groceries, not because I'm your manager, but because it's the right thing to do. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Her hands trembled slightly, and for the first time, she looked less like someone fighting and more like someone ready to heal. A tear slid down Olivia's cheek, but she quickly wiped it away, struggling to maintain her composure. The crowd remained silent, watching the emotional standoff with quiet anticipation. Jake had spoken with wisdom, but the tension still lingered, waiting for resolution. Mr. Harris, his hand still resting lightly on the handle of his cane, took a step closer to the counter. His voice, though quiet, seemed to carry the weight of years of unspoken pain. Olivia, I need you to understand something, he began, his voice trembling slightly but steady. You're right about one thing. War does hurt people, more than most will ever know. But I didn't serve because I believed in violence. I served because I believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The crowd listened, hanging on his every word. Even the employees near the stockroom had stopped working, drawn to the raw vulnerability in his voice. I didn't wear this uniform for praise. I wear this cap to remember the men I lost, my brothers. Some of the finest people I've ever known never made it home. I carry their memory every single day, not to glorify war, but to honor their sacrifice. And I'd give anything, if it meant they could have the life I'm living now. Olivia blinked, her expression softening further, her lips pressing together as his words sank in. Mr. Harris continued, his voice thick with emotion now. My best friend, Michael, he never got to hold his newborn daughter. He never got to sit at a dinner table again, laugh with his family, or see the country he died for. And when I see people disrespect this cap, I don't take it personally for me. I take it personally for them. For Michael, for the ones whose names are on those walls in memorial parks you walk past every day without noticing. A muffled sniffle was heard from somewhere in the crowd. "I'm sorry for what happened to your brother," Mr. Harris added softly, "and I mean that with all my heart. I know what it feels like to lose someone, to wonder if it was worth the pain. But we can't let that pain turn into anger at each other, not when we could be healing instead." By now, Olivia's face was streaked with silent tears. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was listening. Mr. Harris's voice softened even further. "I'm not your enemy, Olivia. I'm just a man trying to live with the weight of what I've seen, just like your brother was. If you need someone to talk to, someone who understands that pain, I'm here." The store felt transformed, no longer a battleground, but a space for healing. The store was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerators in the background. Olivia stood motionless, her eyes fixed on Mr. Harris. The weight of his words had broken through the walls she had built. Her lips trembled as she finally spoke, her voice quieter, rawer than before. I never meant to be cruel," she whispered, blinking rapidly. I've been holding on to this pain for so long, it feels like no one ever cared. My brother Liam, he wasn't the same when he came back. He stopped laughing, stopped talking. And then he was gone. And no one said anything except, "We're sorry for your loss." But sorry didn't bring him back. Her voice cracked, and the crowd felt it. A few people looked away, some discreetly wiping their eyes. Mr. Harris's expression remained calm, though his eyes softened with deep empathy. "I understand, Olivia. Truly. I've lost friends that way too, brothers in arms who made it home physically but never truly returned. The pain stays, the silence, it lingers." Olivia shook her head, her voice trembling. "But it felt like no one cared. All those speeches at his funeral, about sacrifice and honor, but they didn't know him. They didn't see what he went through after. I watched him fall apart. And when I saw you wearing that cap, I guess I thought you were just..." She swallowed hard. "Another person pretending it was all worth it." Jake, the store manager, listened closely, standing quietly to the side, letting the conversation unfold without interference. The crowd, once full of judgment, now seemed transfixed by the honesty being shared. Mr. Harris nodded, his voice gentle. "I can't speak for everyone, Olivia, but I wear this cap not because war was worth it, but because their lives were. I wish Liam could have been here today to hear this conversation. And I wish the world understood the battles soldiers fight long after they leave the battlefield." Olivia's face crumpled as she covered her mouth, silent tears spilling down her cheeks. Jake finally spoke, his voice calm and supportive. "Olivia, we can't erase the pain, but healing starts when we stop assuming the worst about each other. It starts when we do what you're both doing right now, talking." A hush fell over the store as Olivia nodded slowly, lowering her hand from her face. I didn't know how much I was holding on to," she whispered, her voice fragile but sincere. Mr. Harris gently responded, "You're not alone in that pain, Olivia. None of us have to carry it alone." The emotional tension had shifted again, not into confrontation, but into a shared understanding, and the entire crowd could feel it. The quiet emotional shift in the store was palpable. Olivia stood there, vulnerable and shaken, while Mr. Harris remained calm yet visibly moved. The crowd, once tense and divided, now watched with empathy rather than judgment. Yet, there was still something unspoken lingering, something unfinished. Jake, the store manager, took a measured breath and stepped forward. His voice, calm yet commanding, echoed through the silent space. "Everyone, I need you to listen carefully," he began, his eyes sweeping across the room. "What we've seen here today, it's important, because it reminds us all of something we seem to forget far too often." His gaze shifted back to Olivia, then to Mr. Harris. We all carry pain. Olivia's pain, Mr. Harris's pain, the pain of those we've lost, the pain of those who've come home broken. But what we do with that pain is what defines us, not the pain itself. The crowd was listening closely now. Jake's voice softened but stayed powerful. It's easy to judge, it's easy to lash out when we're hurting, to let the weight of our grief twist into anger. But anger rarely heals. Understanding does. Olivia nodded slowly, her hands still trembling but her breathing steadier. Jake's words were reaching her in a way she hadn't expected. Turning toward her directly, Jake continued, Olivia, you spoke from a place of deep pain today, and I'm not here to diminish that. What you've gone through matters. Your brother's struggles, they matter. But what you said to Mr. Harris wasn't about justice. It was about releasing your pain on the wrong person. Olivia lowered her head, ashamed but listening. And Mr. Harris, Jake said, turning toward the veteran, you stood here today and took words no one should have to hear. And you responded with grace, not anger. That kind of strength. That is what real courage looks like. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jake's voice strengthened as he addressed everyone again. We're all guilty of assuming the worst in each other sometimes. But healing starts when we stop talking over one another and start listening. It starts when we realize that pain doesn't need to be a weapon. It can be a bridge. The room remained silent, but the energy had changed entirely. People were no longer just bystanders. They were participants in something transformative. Jake finally looked back at Olivia and Mr. Harris. I think we can all agree. This conversation needed to happen, and now I'm asking, can we finish it not with conflict, but with compassion? The entire store seemed to exhale. Olivia nodded, blinking back tears, while Mr. Harris gave a gentle nod of understanding. The healing had begun. The silence in the store was no longer tense but reflective, heavy with the weight of unspoken emotions. The crowd had shifted from bystanders to witnesses of something profound, an exchange of pain, vulnerability, and now healing. Olivia, her face still streaked with silent tears, inhaled shakily as she looked at Mr. Harris once more. The anger that once fueled her words had evaporated, leaving behind only raw honesty. She swallowed hard, voice fragile but sincere. Mr. Harris, I'm so sorry. Her words echoed softly, but they felt powerful, cutting through the quiet. I was wrong, she continued, voice trembling. I let my pain make assumptions about you. I thought that wearing that cap meant you were proud of the things that hurt my family. I thought if I lashed out it would somehow make what happened to Liam feel less pointless. Her voice cracked as she mentioned her brother's name. Mr. Harris nodded gently, his expression kind but somber. I understand, Olivia, he said, voice calm but filled with empathy. Grief can make us all say things we don't mean. Pain has a way of distorting our judgment, but I don't hold anger toward you. I only wish more people could speak as openly as you have today. Olivia's lips pressed together as more tears escaped. I never stopped loving my brother, but I hated what happened to him. And I guess I blamed anyone who wore that uniform because I didn't know where else to place that pain. The crowd stood motionless, visibly moved. Some nodded in quiet agreement. A woman near the back dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Mr. Harris took a small step forward, his voice softer but still strong. I wear this cap not because I'm proud of war, but because I refuse to let the memory of the men we lost be forgotten. I carry this not for me, but for them. And for the hope that one day no young man or woman will have to experience what your brother did. The vulnerability in his words struck Olivia deeply. She pressed her hand to her chest as if physically feeling the weight of his message. Jake, the store manager, nodded in quiet approval before speaking. Olivia, apologizing takes strength. And Mr. Harris, your grace today. It's a lesson we all needed to see. I think We've all learned something powerful here. A soft ripple of applause began, gentle yet sincere. It wasn't just for the apology, it was for the courage both had shown. Olivia, still tearful, extended her hand toward Mr. Harris. Thank you for your patience and for sharing your story. I'm sorry I judged you. Without hesitation, Mr. Harris shook her hand firmly. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward. The healing wasn't just between two people anymore. It had become a lesson for everyone watching. The emotional tension in the store had transformed completely. What had started as a painful confrontation had blossomed into a moment of empathy and healing. The quiet applause continued, not out of obligation, but genuine respect for the growth everyone had just witnessed. Jake, the store manager, stepped forward once more, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. His voice, steady but emotional, filled the space. Mr. Harris, he began, turning to face the veteran directly. Your grace today has taught all of us a powerful lesson. You've shown us that strength isn't measured by how loudly we speak, but by how much compassion we can offer, even when we've been wronged. The veteran gave a humble nod, his weathered face reflecting quiet gratitude, though the weight of his past was still visible in his eyes. Jake continued, louder now so everyone could hear clearly. As the manager of this store, I want to express my respect for you and every veteran who has served with honor. Today, I'm personally covering the cost of your groceries as a small token of our gratitude. A hushed murmur rippled through the crowd as they processed the gesture. Then, applause followed, stronger, deeper than before. Mr. Harris shook his head gently, lifting his hand. Jake, that's kind, but it's not necessary. I didn't come here expecting anything. I just wanted to buy my groceries. Jake smiled. And you'll leave here today, not just with your groceries, but with the respect you deserve. And more than that. He turned to the crowd. Effective immediately, this store will implement a permanent discount for all veterans as a sign of our appreciation for their service and sacrifices. The applause swelled, echoing louder through the aisles. Some guests nodded in agreement, others clapped with tears in their eyes. Mr. Harris, clearly moved, bowed his head slightly. Thank you, not for the discount, but for showing that kindness still matters. Olivia, standing quietly beside the register, nodded in agreement. It does, and I'm grateful I was reminded of that today. A sense of unity had replaced the division. The store no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a community coming together. In the days following the emotional confrontation at the grocery store, a video captured by a bystander began circulating online. It showed the entire exchange, from Olivia's initial confrontation to Mr. Harris's heartfelt words and Jake's powerful speech about respect and empathy. What struck viewers most wasn't the conflict itself, but how it had been resolved with grace, understanding, and compassion. Comments flooded social media. This is what real healing looks like. We need more conversations like this, not shouting matches. Mr. Harris, you're a true hero, not just for your service, but for your patience and kindness. The video quickly went viral, sparking national conversations about veterans' trauma and the power of empathy. News outlets picked up the story, praising the way the situation had been handled with dignity on all sides. Meanwhile, back in the small town, the impact was even deeper. At the grocery store, the veteran discount announced by Jake remained in place, but it wasn't just a policy. It became part of a broader initiative. Employees were trained to understand veteran experiences better. Conversations about compassion and understanding were being had among staff and customers alike. And Olivia? She didn't quit her job out of embarrassment. Instead, she stayed. She continued working at the same register where the confrontation had taken place, but with a different heart. She even began volunteering at a local veterans support group, driven not by obligation but by genuine growth. One evening, Mr. Harris returned to the store. Olivia saw him from across the aisle and approached quietly. Mr. Harris, she said softly, no longer trembling or defensive. I wanted you to know. I'm volunteering now, at the outreach center. I've met other veterans and I'm learning. Thank you for being patient with me that day. I needed it more than I realized. Mr. Harris smiled warmly, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're making a difference now, Olivia. That matters. I'm proud of you. What began as a painful misunderstanding had transformed into a powerful ripple of change, proof that listening, forgiveness, and courage to admit our mistakes could heal even the deepest wounds, and the entire town would never forget it.